I'm Richard Brady of Mentis Consulting, and this afternoon I'm going to be talking to Dr. Robert Hogan, the founder of Hogan Assessment Systems. Robert Hogan is probably the world's most respected personality psychologist, and in this discussion he'll be focusing on the motivations for why he studied this field and the approach. Tell me about your personal motivation to study the field of personality. Why did you choose that field?
That's interesting. When I was a kid in high school, I read Freud, and I was absolutely bedazzled. I thought it was the most interesting, fascinating line of inquiry I'd ever come across. Later in college, I actually studied formal academic psychology and found it to be useless, intellectually bankrupt. Then subsequent to that, I took a job as a probation officer working with delinquent kids, and I realized right then that if you want to understand real people and real job in real life context, you have no alternative but to appeal to personality psychology, and at that point all there was to appeal to was Freud.
How popular was the topic of personality when you started out?
I wasn't interested in clinical psychology. I was interested in real life careers, professional success and failure, and there was no personality associated with those kinds of that kind of an inquiry. It was basically a dead field. When I started studying personality in the late 1960s, it was under severe attack from all sides of academic psychology, and I was very much sort of a lone wolf in what I was trying to do.
Tell me, how did you get started?
As I mentioned, I worked for 2 years as a probation officer. I became really interested in the problem of crime, how to predict it, how to analyze it, and how to forecast outcomes for treating criminals. I thought I would go to graduate school, study delinquency, solve the problem of crime, and make an important contribution to the major single issue in our society. When I arrived in graduate school, I was armed with little more than a burning desire to save the world. I knew nothing about psychological measurement. I got, by accident, recruited over to work at the Institute of Personality Assessment and Research, where I was introduced to the assessment tradition, which is an old, venerable tradition and forgotten tradition in academic psychology. That's where I learned about personality assessment, and I said, I can take the tools of personality assessment and apply them to the problem of delinquency, and I'll have a solid empirical handle on this problem. That is, diagnosing delinquency, what the underlying sources, and predicting treatment options for kids.
What is personality?
Personality is actually two things. There's a big picture and a smaller picture. At the big picture level, personality is about the nature of human nature. It's about what we're all like way down deep. It's about human universals. And I can't imagine a more important problem. People are the most dangerous, significant, consequential force on earth. You would think people would be interested in understanding this terribly powerful and dangerous force. In fact, they aren't. There are something like 300 personality psychologists left in the United States. There are no more graduate programs. The whole enterprise has gone kaput. I think what will happen is the biologists will fill in behind because the problem is so important. Anyway, bottom line is personality psychology is about the nature of human nature, how and in what ways we're all alike. It's also about the question of how and in what ways we're all different. And those are two separate questions and have to be answered in separate ways. Concerning the question of how people are all alike, a study of anthropology, sociology, paleoanthropology, and human origins indicates two clear things. Well, the first is that people always live in groups, and that's true. We evolved as a group living species. And second, every group has a status hierarchy. People are at the bottom, there are people in the middle, there are people at the top, everyone knows who's where, and most social life involves negotiating changes in status. Those two statements are true, and they suggest then that the two most important generalizations we can make about people are people need other people, they need bonds, social associations, they need to get along with other people, and secondly, people need as much status as they can get in their lives, which involves a certain amount of competition and pushing each other. People are concerned with getting along and getting ahead, and there are real individual differences in people's ability to do this, and those individual differences have very consequential payoffs for life success. So starting with this generalization that everyday life is about efforts to get along and get ahead, that tells us where the most consequential individual differences will be. As I say, there will be very important individual differences around people's ability to get along and build with other people and build relationships, and there will be very consequential individual differences associated with people's ability to acquire and maintain status. And that then drives the assessment effort. Life is inherently about social interaction. Social interactions are guided by implicit theories of what other people want and need and expect from us. Personality psychology is about making those implicit theories explicit. Some people have better implicit theories than others. Their lives go better, and it would be nice to be able to capture that implicit knowledge.
RT, in general terms, why does personality matter in our lives?
When personality measures are appropriately constructed, they can predict really important, significant life outcomes. Everything from earning, marital status to longevity, actual health, mortality rates. You can predict everything that's significant. You can predict everything that the medical profession can predict.
I've heard you talk about intrapersonal and interpersonal psychology. Can you tell me what is the difference?
It's actually quite an interesting problem. Intrapsychology is classic Freudian psychoanalysis, where the assumptions are that the news about people is involved in these buried deep dark secrets. Problems in life come from not understanding and exploring those deep dark repressed unconscious secrets. That's one whole tradition, and that's all European, French, and German. The alternative model it comes from a bunch of Irish and Scottish writers, where the argument is that life is about social relationships and interpersonal interactions, and the problems you have in life don't come from deep dark secrets. They come from really basically poor social skills. And these are two very different emphases. The first, the problem is to explore the inner you. In the second case, the problem is to explore how you treat other people. I'm clearly on the side of the second approach.
At a personal level, why are you interested in leadership?
I think leadership is the most important problem in the organizational sciences. If good people are in charge, nations, countries, and companies profit and succeed. If bad people are in charge, there are terrible disasters. Consider the following statistic. In the 20th century, 167 million people were killed for political reasons. Of those people, 30 million people were killed by invading armies, and 137 million people were killed by their own government. It really matters who's in charge.
So, what is the link between personality and leadership success?
I think the link is as follows. Who you are determines how you lead. I think it's impossible to distinguish personality from leadership, because who you are determines how you lead. When I first started studying leadership in the 1980s, no one believed in personality, and as a result, no one believed in leadership. The conventional wisdom was that leadership is a function of a situation. That's basically a nihilistic and anti-intellectual perspective on leadership. What I've been trying to do since the 1980s is demonstrate the nature of the links between personality as measured in terms of, for example, the 5-factor model and leadership effectiveness.
So, RT, what is the 5-factor model?
In 2002, a very smart psychologist named Tim Judge published a major paper. It was a meta-analysis of the relationship between personality and leadership effectiveness. He used something like 20,000 people in 5,000 different organizations, managers from every sector of business in the U.S. economy and from every level in these organizations. And what he showed in a refereed article was that 4 of the 5 dimensions of the 5-factor model, adjustment, sociability, conscientiousness or prudence, and openness, inquisitiveness, all predicted measured indices of leadership across every level of organization, across all kinds of people and job types. The data are really clear for people who live in the rational universe that personality is powerfully and demonstrably linked to every kind of measured effectiveness in leadership.
You've been studying leadership for 25 years. How would you summarize your main conclusions?
We know a lot about leadership effectiveness and how the normal parts of personality, what we call the bright side of personality, predicts leadership effectiveness. But a more interesting question from my point of view concerns the causes, the base rate, the incidence rate, and the causes of bad leadership. The question is, how many bad ones are there out there? When I first started asking that question in the 1980s, I said, what is the base rate of incompetent management in corporate America? People were saying, 5%, 6% of the managers might be incompetent. It turns out, based on such data as you can put together, that the actual base rate of incompetent management is more like 50 to 65%, and the failure rate for managers in corporate America is almost 2/3. So the question then is, what causes that? And it turns out that that failure rate is systematically related to personality too, but in this case it's related to what we call the dark side of personality.
Can you describe the Hogan inventories in more detail?
I think what's unique about our approach to management and leadership development is that we have a well-articulated theory of leadership that sits underneath 3 really well-validated assessment devices. We talk about the bright side, the dark side, and the inside. The bright side is what you see in an interview or when people are sort of performing at their best. We measure the bright side using something called the Hogan Personality Inventory. It's our contribution to the literature around the 5-factor theory or 5-factor model. We measure the dark side using something called the Hogan Development Survey. This is an 11 scale instrument that covers the standard categories of managerial failure. We measure the inside using something we call the Motives, Values, and Preferences Inventory. This is about the actual drivers. These are the values are part of personality, or used to be called character. This is actually quite an important thing that folks tend not to look at. We think we have a systematic handle on values, and that has very important consequences for career outcomes as well.
What are the main options for an organization wishing to use your inventories?
We use the inventories in 2 separate ways. And on the one hand, we do a great deal of selection research. We use it pre-employment selection. We have data on every job in the U.S. economy, and we have data on maybe 300 or 400 different job categories. So drawing on that data and whatever research we do at the local organization, we can design selection procedures for every job from janitor to CEO. So on the one hand, there's sort of mass entry-level selection. On the other hand, we use the assessments for career development. People take the tests, we analyze the results, and then we give them feedback regarding how to improve and enhance and generally dramatize the development of their careers.
What are the new developments at Hogan Assessment Systems?
People have been pushing us for 20 years to develop a measure of cognitive ability. And I resisted that because I wanted to know what they wanted, what kind of information they actually wanted when they ordered up the use of a cognitive test. I finally concluded what they want to know is something about the person's judgment. Does the person have good or bad judgment? Something about the person's decision-making style. About 6 months ago, we published the Hogan Business Reasoning Inventory, the HBRI, and this is a measure of individual differences in people's reasoning style and typical judgment characteristics. We talk about tactical judgment and strategic judgment. People who are good at tactical reasoning are very good at implementation issues and analyzing the data that are right in front of them. People who are good at strategic reasoning will ask whether that's even the appropriate data to be analyzing. Put those 2 together in a 2x2 table, and you get a very interesting matrix of decision-making style.
Based on all of your research and experience, what is the most important advice you'd give to someone who aspires to be a good leader?
Every intervention with people or organizations should begin with a solid assessment. If you don't know where you're going, any road will get you there. People who want to improve their leadership style need to first of all undergo some kind of thorough leadership assessment, and then use those data, that feedback, as the basis for some kind of a developmental improvement program.
And finally, RT, you travel very widely and continue to advise many of the world's leading companies. What continues to keep you motivated?
Actually, the answer is maybe not all that noble. I'm a very competitive person. There are 2,500 other test publishers in the United States. I think most of them are selling junk. And my sort of private goal in life is to win, is to take all the assessment business there is away from those people and get people to using appropriate and proper assessments.
RT, thank you for your insights today. It's been good talking to you.
It's been great fun, and thanks for having me by. How's that? Ta-da, ta-da, ta-da,